My first memory in St. Louis was the fact that I was told that I must attend a Bible church and take a course. I did that, and after I had finished the course, I was given a Bible named the King James Bible, which I have here. It is from 1920. So, because I was in a very religious family, it was assumed that I would continue my belief in God. Now, after all of these years, it has come back, and I am able to tell my unusual story about what happened to me at the time I was in Germany during World War II. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, wait a minute, I'm trying to think what year that was.
At 43.
40,
40.
40, yeah, 43, it was 43, right.
Do you remember where you were?
Yes, I was working for Curtis Wright at the time. And when Pearl Harbor happened, it kept me from joining the service. I did, at that time, work for this airplane manufacturing company, and I was able to stay there until 1943 February. After Pearl Harbor was attacked, I remember President Roosevelt telling the United States that this was an infamous attack and that we would be going to war with Germany and with Japan. Unfortunately, Pearl Harbor was a disaster for America. And there was so much to say after that attack that every person in the United States who was capable of working for peace was called into duty. Now, if you go back, I will tell you that there was a war brewing in Europe. The man Hitler had attacked Poland and was overtaking most of Europe at that time. Because of the terrible fighting that went on in Europe at that time, it was imperative that we began manufacturing all war equipment. It is very, very fortunate that we entered that war because there was a time in England when Churchill demanded that every church be filled with prayer. And because of that, I am convinced that we eventually won the war in Europe.
So how long after Pearl Harbor did you get your papers?
Well, I'm trying to think the time. The 1943, yes. It was 1943 that we heard of Pearl Harbor. And at that time I was working for Curtiss-Wright, and I went practically almost instantly into the military service. I was shipped to Texas, where I joined a squadron called the 3704 Glider Squadron, and this squadron was devoted to making glider pilots flyable. We taught the navigation, especially night navigation. And the pilots that were trained also to fly motor aircraft. And they were trained at Shepherd Field, where I was a member. At Shepherd Field, it became the hub for these huge, massive gliders that were to carry 15 men and one small jeep. At one time, we were called to the apron of the airfield and told that we would see a DC-3 airplane pick up one of these gliders from the ground using heavy nylon ropes which stretched. Each time the plane would come down and pick that rope up, the glider would come with it. And we were worried that because of the impact, that the plane might not be able to continue flying and drop in a tragedy. But it was not so. The glider lifted off and it followed the DC-3. The plane circled the airfield, came around, and when it was at about 1,000 feet, it pulled the glider loose, and the glider was on its own. Once that happened, the pilot in the glider carefully brought the glider down to ground and landed it practically in front of the crowd that was watching. What a thrill that was. That was really a thrill, because we feel that we were helping to do something substantially perfect.
Now, what was the story with those gliders? Was it a successful?
Yes. The story with the glider was the fact that because they were to be used on the invasion of France and Belgium, it was the possibility that we could enter fighting men behind German lines, and at least we would be in a place where it would be possible for me to confront them. What happened on the 6th of June, 1944, the invasion of Europe took place. And when that took place, the gliders were lifted from England and flown at night over the Channel, headed for France and Belgium, where they were to land and disload. Unfortunately, the farmers of France and Belgium had built high hedges circling the land that they farmed. And for some reason, we had not investigated that. When the gliders came down, they could not see these tremendous hedges, and they went into them directly. These hedges, incidentally, were so heavy that even tanks could not penetrate. So you can see what happened. Some of the gliders landed in lakes and water, but consequently, most of them made their way.
What a wonderful story. Now, tell me what you did after that.
After that, well, see, I was in training at the time, and because the glider pilots had left the United States, and we were no longer needed. We did not know where they were going to go or do, but we found out later that they were to be on the invasion the day that Eisenhower called that movement. So we were useless, training nothing now, and we had to be used where we would be. So what happened was we were transferred from the Air Force into the infantry of the U.S. Army.
Now, hang on. You were MP first, though, right?
Yeah.
You were an MP on the.
No, I'll get to that. We were transferred from the Air Force into the regular Army as combat infantrymen. And we knew not where we would be sent then. It could have been Japan or the islands, or it could have been Europe, or possibly even North Alaska. Well, once we were trained as infantrymen, we were told that we were moving from Texas to Baltimore, Maryland. And within several weeks, the orders came through for us to be shipped to Baltimore, Maryland. I knew that in Baltimore, Maryland, I would be visiting and able to see Washington, D.C. For almost 2 months, I was in Baltimore visiting Washington, D.C. on weekends. And I walked into a USO, which was an organization devoted to helping servicemen. I walked into this place, and there were women dancing, There were cookies and cakes and much to drink. So when I spotted a particular lady, I asked her to dance. And she agreed. And we talked and sat and talked about what she did because she was a teacher. And I told her where I was in Baltimore and that I might be back next week and maybe the week after before I ship out, because I told her I had no idea where I would be. The following 2 weeks we spent together. We went to George Washington's home. We went to a zoo and spent time sitting on the grass there talking. Of course, the orders were going to come through. I knew what was going to happen, and surely they did 3 weeks after that. And I found that I was headed for New York. This was a blessing in a way, because I knew that I was never going to the Pacific that way. The first day that I got into New York, I was taken to the pier, to the Hudson River Pier, and with about 7 or 8, 10 other men, walked up to a ship. The ship was so high, I could hardly see the top. Well, I did not know what it was because there was no name on the bow. It turned out to be the Queen Mary. They were using the Queen Mary to send troops over to Europe. I was in charge of, temporarily, the subject of being the MP, to tell the troops where to go, what to do, where to sleep, where to eat, and when. Once we learned everything about the ship, the 7 or 8 or 9 of us took over as the troops came aboard, and it seemed like they would never end. Well, I was told later that there were as many as 15 to 16,000 American troops aboard of that ship.
And some British too, right? And some British?
British.
Weren't there some British pilots?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Anyway, the ship carried not only Americans, but a great number of British pilots who had trained in American aircraft and learned to fly our planes to use in Europe against Germany. I was stationed in a place near the bow of the ship and also near the stern of the ship. Both ends of the ship were open in a corridor about 35 or 40 feet wide, but open to the sea. So I could look out, and I was told, never, ever do you light a cigarette, because a cigarette being lit at sea can be seen for miles. And there was always the danger of German submarines. Anyway, as I spent my time keeping the corridor doors closed so that the pilots who were stationed inside the corridors could not exit, I was able to stay warm or step outside at night and cool off. It was an ideal place for me to stay. Once we were underway, we passed we passed the Statue of Liberty. We had escorts on each side, 2 destroyers going out toward Europe. Once the destroyers left us, we were able to be on our own. And we were told that the ship would be traveling at a little less than 40 knots, which was a great speed. Now, the first day out, we ran into what the captain called a nor'easter, a storm at sea. And there we were, but the captain also commanded every passenger to be below the sea line on the ship to balance, because the ship was not only pitching, it was also rolling. And when it rolled, I could actually look down and see the edge of the water down there. A fantastic sight it was. If someone was doing a wash, they could have done hundreds of washes in the turning, because the ship also had 4 very large propellers, unbelievably in size. So I could understand why we were making the speed that we could. The captain said that he would have to slow the ship in a little while because he would lose steering. In other words, he didn't want to lose the steering because he would lose the speed. Oh, all right, now, 6 days later, after we had crossed the Atlantic, we landed. Where did we land? We landed in Scotland, in a place called the Firth of the Clyde, a deep water port. And we had to eventually unload all of the military people. Once the military people were unloaded, which took about 4 or 5 days, I was lucky enough to meet several of the Scotch women who were cleaning the ship from the salt that was thrown up during our crossing. Once the men were debarked from the ship, it was our turn. So we were called to disembark and move to the small landing craft to take us to the trains that were waiting. Once we were on the trains, we moved to London. And there I was able to see the damage done by the V-2 rockets that had been sent by Germany. It was a thrilling experience to see the way the people had succumbed and made their way to the wreckages for shelter. A few days after training there, it was our turn to go across the channel. So we were sent to Southampton. And from Southampton, we landed at a town called Le Havre in France. From that point on, we were put on trucks sent up to Belgium, where there was a camp up there called Lucky Strike. We were given food and supplies, we were fed, and we enjoyed a little bit of peace up there in our preparation to enter Germany and to our final destination. In the 393rd Company K, in the 393rd Battalion, was a fighting battalion. So we knew we were in for a problem. I had crossed the Rhine right there, and there was a large bridge called the Ludendorff Bridge that was being bombed by the Germans because they did not want Americans to be able to take the tanks over the bridge. The trucks that we were in at the time we were crossing were within 100 yards of the bombs that were falling on that bridge. Eventually, once we were across, we went into the town, and I'm trying to remember the town. It was a town very close to the Rhine, possibly one of the older towns in Germany, and we were placed in a farmhouse on the hill, just on the outskirts of this city, town. And at the very same time, during the night, the shells from the Germans were being sent over us, trying still to knock the bridge out. They were coming from railroad guns, and they were tremendous because they were knocking the plaster off the ceilings of the farmhouse, falling on us. We were not hurt, but it was quite an experience. The following morning, a man from the 393rd Infantry Battalion came to pick up our small group and take us to our permanent assignment. Once he came, we were told, "Follow him, please." And at this point, this is a crucial point, because he turned to me, only to me, as we were walking back, and said, "Don't I know you?" I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what to think. If the people watching this video would recall, we had at least 16 to 20 million men under arms at that time. And he said to me, "Don't I know you?" Can you imagine? I was really shocked. Then he said, "I'm Smitty." Smitty. I said, "I'm sorry, I don't quite." "Yes," he said, "Dave, He said, you and I worked together in 1937 in a grocery store called Malls, Molls. Do you remember? I said, yes, I do remember. Is that right? Then he said to me, because we are and have been so close friends, I am going to ask my commanding officer to place you in my unit in the infantry company. Well, that was quite a shock. I thought, my gosh, here's a man I knew before, recognized me, and I'm going to be with him in the combat zone, fighting. Well, it was really a wonderful change in my life. And the first thing I thought of was the Lord. Who could have ever arranged a meeting of that magnitude at that time during the war? It really confirmed my love for the Lord. And from that time on, the Lord was my guide. The war continued on for a while, another 3 months, and thank goodness, neither Smitty or I received any wounds during the fighting. Please don't expect any words about the actual fighting. I don't talk about that at all. It's not really important to me, and it is something that most infantrymen never say a word about. I was actually at that time, the First Army. And the First Army was guided and governed by General Hodges, who was a great commander. And because of that, the First Army was headed northward into Germany to destroy the manufacturing plants in Germany. Now, there were thousands of workers in the Ruhr pocket that we surrounded, and they were corralled as prisoners of war, and actually they were turned over to the command in Western Germany to be processed, leaving no one to fight up in the Ruhr pocket. So we were transferred again to the Third Army, which was fighting in southern Germany. And the general who was in charge of the Third Army was George Patton. I was able to see Patton as he passed us by, going to the front to continue our fighting. And, believe it or not, I did see the 2 pearl-handled pistols he was carrying. He was a fighting man and loved what he was doing. Aside from that, my story is about the same. I finished the war, and Smitty and I were together most of the time, But there were many instances, comical instances, that happened to me as I finished serving occupation in Germany and eventually shipped back to the United States, which I will tell you about.
So now, pick it up from what did you do after you got transferred into the third under Patton? What did you do then?
To Patton,
Yeah.
well, we fought. There was another 2 or 3 months of fighting that went on until we actually finished. And they said, "Okay, fellas, it's we've done as much as we can do. We're gonna knock these guys off," because they began to surrender piece by piece. Artillery piece by piece. The fighting had 2 phases from that time on. One was the phase of rifle fire, which was very close to close combat, and the other phase was shelling, incoming shelling from the Germans. And it was wicked. We were in what they call positions of defilade behind the shells, below the shells, just barely. And we had to watch very closely because some of these shells were coming in too close for us to realize. The noise was outrageous. It was terrific. And we had a first sergeant in our platoon. He and I were lying flat, just waiting, because as they came over, they would whistle, and they would actually scare you. As for a minute, one of them exploded not too far from the sergeant. He reached over and tried to pick up a piece of the shrapnel that landed within his arm's length. And he said in a Texas drawl, "Come saw, it's hot." I can never forget that one. That was really great. But as we...
Well, tell me about okay, so you closed down the factories so then you were kind of transferred, okay, under Patton's command.
On the way.
You were transferred over to Patton's.
Oh, that was
So
from the First Army.
Right, so tell me about what you did with the Third Army. Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, we moved from the Ruhr pocket, which was industrial, southward toward the mountains of Germany, where Hitler was at the time. So that was a truck move. We just boarded trucks and joined the tank commanders. So we thought we were safe. No, we were not really safe. This is wintertime, and it was cold. I mean, there was snow on the ground, and the temperature was down below freezing sometimes. But the tank offered 2 things: heat from the massive engines coming from the louvers on the back of the tank itself. And as the heat came out, it warmed us very, very well. The only other problem was the tanks drew military fire from the 88 guns that they were still using. And while you were lying on the back of the tank, you could not hear, because of the engine noise, you could not hear the incoming shells. So that was really a problem. I wish there was some way I could express the feeling that we got. But I can tell you, I'm no hero. The heroes are over there still. Believe me. I know some of them, or did.
So what did you do? What was next? What did you liberate? I'm trying to get.
What we did once the Germans decided to surrender, and that happened a little further down into the southern part of Germany. We were relieved of our duties and told that we would occupy those parts of Europe, and until that time came, everybody who had been fighting was an occupation person. So there.
Well, tell me about the death camps. Tell me about Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, we missed Auschwitz as we went south. But there were many small, very tiny concentration camps on the way south toward the mountains. Maybe there might have been 25 or 30 gas chambers that were visible by doors, and that was all. But here's an instance that happened to me there. As we were traveling south through a field being farmed by German farmers, still plowing, and the Germans were firing over them toward us. I could not believe it. The only thing that saved us was the distance with which we were apart. 25 to 30 feet was nothing. We had to be at least 100 feet apart as we walked or ran to get cover. There was an outhouse on the trip that I was taking, and the Germans were firing mortars at us, and you could not hear them very well. They only made a noise like that, and they would explode somewhere. I heard this one coming in, and I was not yet to the outhouse, but it hit the ground in front of me and failed to explode. But it hit the soil so hard that the soil came up on me, very close. Otherwise, I would never be here. So that was one of the things. Now, as far as this location was concerned, it was cold and it was daylight. So we got into the town called Landshut. That was the name of the town. It's still there. And the Germans had looted everything in that town. They had taken everything from the banks, broken all the windows in the stores. But we were to go on. And this was very close to the 8th of May. as we left the town in a long line, because there are, in an infantry company, there are approximately 176 men spread out and making our way south. I was filling a portion of my obligation at that time to walk point. Now, anyone who knows what point is in an infantry company knows that you are to be ahead of the entire company walking alone. And when that happens, your chances are pretty slim. As we left the town and walked into the forest, I saw something that I had never seen before. And that was an airplane hidden in the forest. What an airplane it was. It had no propellers. Of course, I didn't have time to look at it much, but I could see that it was a jet. It was one of the first jets, probably, that Germany was working on to perfect and fight us. Later, I found out, after I'm back here at the States, that sure enough, they were working on this jet, and a friend of mine now has pictures of it.
Wow. And tell me the story about the sheep in the.
Oh, yes, there's there is one instance where walking in a forest can be deadly, and it concerns the method of trip wires attached to explosives and then attached to small trees where a GI would have to walk through, trip the wire, and the explosive would kill him. We found this out by seeing the number of sheep that were lying dead in the forest. Many of the sheep belonged to farmers, of course, and lay there practically motionless. So we tried as best we could to avoid forests where trees were very close. And that was one of the instances that I recall. Now,
did you ever go to any of the bigger? You didn't go to Auschwitz, but did you go to any of the other?
no, we never got to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was more to the north and a little bit to the east. That was a big one. But we knew they existed. There were many small concentration camps working by the Germans with German people. They were there and lived in them as they repaired the railroad sidings and also the bombed out rail yards, because they were trying to repair as much as possible and keep things moving.
Mm-hmm. Tell me the story about the British servicemen that you liberated from the farm. Ended up, didn't they shoot?
Yes. First of all, I want to tell you about the farm. Every time we came across a farm, a small farm. The first thing that we all did was to get in the barn or in the home of that farm, run up to the second floor to the chimney, where there was always a metal door, and open the door, and what did you see? Sausage. Smoked sausage. Kibasi. And, of course, kibasi was good eating, and we all enjoyed that. This one farm we went into, there was a platform outside, and there were 2 or 3 German prisoners that we had taken, and there were about 5 or 6 Americans. We were all standing together with the prisoner in our midst. Now, for some reason, one of the prisoners, and it was his only one, grabbed an M1, which is a regular rifle, from one of Americans. And before anybody could think, he fired it into the GI. I think he killed him. I'm not sure, but I know he fell. One of the other Americans took his rifle and killed the German in front of me. So that took care of that possibility again. We knew not to trust.
There
Now,
was another story you told me a long time ago. It was a British serviceman, and once you liberated them, they wanted to rape and kill the people who owned the farm.
oh, that was something else. Once the British were liberated, they had been there for maybe a couple of years. And because they had been there that long, of course, they were looking for women. And some of the women were still walking around freely, and they grabbed them, of course, took them into a barn or a house, and there they raped them. A sad commentary, but it did happen.
But they had just been persecuted probably by those same women.
Yeah, right.
How do you think the prisoners of war were treated?
Well,
How do you think the British had been treated?
well, at least they weren't. They seemed to be well fed. They didn't lack that. But once they were liberated, they ran out like like flies. You know, they just could not stay in the barracks they were in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's take it from. Okay.
Did you have a list of something?
Yeah, I do. I was going to get that in just a sec. I'm just trying to think. Tell me about V-Day, Victory Day. Tell me about the day that you found out that the war was over.
Oh, well, that's the day. That was on May 8th, I believe. And I was walking point in the forest and found the airplane. And it was almost hard to tell from my other friends, GIs, how excited they were, because it was a period of excitement. Every infantry company has what they call an executive platoon. And in that platoon, there is a radio man which carries a number 300 radio on his back. It's heavy. And then there are 2 or 3 mortar GIs that carry mortars ready to be fired at any time. And then there is another person who carries the ammunition for the mortar, because the mortar is heavy and the ammunition is heavy. Then there's the commander, of course, and there's a map person who carries all of the maps possible to see and determine which way the company is going to move. I would say in the executive platoon, there probably are 12 or 13. And then Smitty and I we were told we had to take care of the wounded who were coming back, or at least go with the man with the cross on his helmet and pick them up and take them back to battalion. Meaning we had to go back through possible German lines and be killed ourselves. In this one case, it was so dark I could not see the person ahead of me. But I had gotten together 4 prisoners and a stretcher, and we had a wounded man who had been shot in the stomach, and I decided to use the 4 prisoners to put the man on a stretcher and carry him back to battalion, but it was so dark I could not see. The only communication I had with this man was to say the words Alphen and Unter, meaning up and down. Well, we walked most of the night very slowly because the Germans were in the trees above us. And if you said anything, you were gone.
Now that's what you got the Bronze Star for, correct?
Yes,
And that was just for saving that one person's life?
yes.
Now how did you know you could trust these Germans?
Well, the only thing is that it was so dark, you couldn't go anywhere. I had to, I had to have a hand on the shoulder of one of them. I knew they weren't going to run. There was no place to go.
That's unbelievable.
It also was sleeting at the time, and I know the man was in pain. Definitely.
You told him to keep quiet.
Right. Sure, you had to say something.
That's got to be tough. Tell me about what your impression of the Russians was.
Well, after we were in the occupation mode, I was staying in a small town called Miltonburg. And Miltonburg was a town where the Germans came to spend their summers. And the Russians had come as far west and had met us at one period. But the reason it was interesting to have them around is because they were drinkers and they loved their booze. They really, and they used it. Now, there was a road in front of the hotel in which I was billeted that ran maybe a half a mile down the way and then crossed the river. The river was the Seine River, if I remember. And the Seine River was a deep river, navigable by ordinary boats. But the, the Russians had been drinking so heavily that they were yelling and screaming. And I saw them pass by the front of the hotel, and they turned. What they did not know, they were headed for the river, but there was no bridge. The bridge had been blown away. Well, one after another, the trucks that carried them and the tank right into the water, and then silence for a while. But isn't that amazing? Across that river was a store that originally, in peacetime, sold wine and schnapps and all types of whiskey. And of course, the GIs found that right away. And they used to swim across the river and pick up bottles of wine, schnapps, bring them back to the hotel. Very nice. But a great time was had by all there.
How did you feel towards the Germans?
Towards the Russians?
Towards the Germans?
Oh, the Germans? Well, you see, I guess there's something that I should say. You must consider them your enemy, but you're not. You don't have that inclination to kill them right away. You're so busy watching for yourself, trying to stay alive, and be the kind of a person that you always had been. You generally don't take them into consideration, except when the incoming shells come and the rifle fire comes. That's when you think about it. You don't think about being killed. We were there for a purpose. You don't even consider yourself being wounded even. Except there was one wound that everybody thought about. And that was called the $1 million wound. That kind of a wound would send you back to the hospital. That was a some wound.
But when you had German prisoners of war, did you treat them with respect, or did you resent
Oh,
what they'd
sure.
done, or did you?
Oh, yes. The first thing we told them is you're going to get a good meal. And if there was a place to put them, like under a house, in Germany there were many open areas under a home. They used to herd them in there. And if it was light outside, you would actually talk with them, tell them, and ask them what they did as civilian. So you become actually almost friends, you know? One thing I must not fail to tell you, the churches were generally filled with women underneath. And they stayed there with any children that they had, waiting for us to come through. And they waited. Of course, there was another thing about what we were given. We were given rations, K rations, C rations, and in that ration box were cigarettes, chocolate bar, a long chocolate bar, and another type of bar which was soap. It was GI soap. And the soap that was in that box would wash anything. The women loved to get that soap because they had no soap in Germany. That was wonderful. So we were able to give them something in return.
Well, tell me about when you and Smitty dug out that hole and put the door on it.
Oh, yes. Shortly after I joined the 393rd, we were on our entire location was high, long, almost a mountain. And we were waiting for a large mortar battalion, American, to come next to our group and shell the Germans across a small stream. And that reminds me of another one, and I'll get to that. Across this small stream, the Germans were dug in using shell holes for protection. Every time a shell would come, a mortar shell would go over, they would jump out of the hole and they would be standing up because the shells contained white phosphorus. And the phosphorus would ignite the clothing. So they would come up and they were trying to get it off. Followed by the shell with the white phosphorus, which would get them out of the holes. They were followed by HP, high explosive shells. So there they were brushing their clothes off and the high explosive shells would come in and that would get them. I almost picked up a brand new German machine gun because it was absolutely perfect, but I couldn't carry it. Now, because we were up high and there was a road that ran up that incline, there was, on each side of the road was a very deep ditch, almost as deep as this room. The area lended itself to the fact that you could go down in it and then come up on the road. Smitty said to me, "We are going to take care of ourselves for the night. Get your bayonet out and we'll start digging." So we began to dig in the side of this big depression. Now we had enough dug out that we could crawl in because it was firm. Smitty went down somewhere and found a door. Not a garage door, but a regular door. And he brought it back, and as it was getting dark, he pulled it over the hole, and we were in the hole alone. Nobody knew we were there. And he always had the idea that if the Germans came, they would see a door, but they wouldn't bother. The next morning, when it became a little bit light, Smitty pulled the door aside just enough to look out. And when he looked out, who did he see? A .30 caliber water-cooled machine gun, ours. They were facing the door. Oh, I still hear him yelling, "Don't shoot!" They were about as surprised as we were. But that was something. Now, something that came to my mind. Oh, at certain times we had to cross small streams. And they weren't very wide, maybe as wide as this room is, but they were slick. The stones were slick. And I had done something that every American does as you fight through the area. You go in and investigate every home that you can get into that has been bombed or half destroyed. You go into the rooms where they kept valuables like perfume and things like that. And there's one home in Aachen. I walked into that house, and on the second floor, there was a chest. And what was in that chest? Perfume. Chanel 5. And I knew what that was. That was French perfume with beautiful stuff. So I put it in my field jacket. It's only a bottle about so big. And once we left that area of Aachen, we came across one of these small streams. Of course, the whole company is running to get over the stream. Some had fallen, and who falls? I did. I fell before I even got out of the stream. And what broke? The Chanel 5. And I mean, I smelled like, I really did. I smelled like a French whore. The guys didn't want anything to do with me. Of course, they were all kidding me. Well, a few days later, we were headed south, and we came across a farm. And the farm had a building that was tapered. It was on a slant. And because it was cold, it was raining and sleeting and everything else, the first thing that the guys did was to walk in and get out of the weather. I decided I'm not going to stay here too long in one place, so I crawled in under one of the benches that was lining this long room. Well, I was under there for a few minutes and tried to get out of the way because the guys were coming right past the benches, and I didn't want to be stepped on. So, while I was lying there, I felt something wet. And I felt my field jacket, and it was wet. Oh, what am I in? Because there was a room behind this room where there were pigs. And I thought, well, I hope it's not just, pig things. After I got out of that thing, I began to smell something. And what do you think it was? The men who had been rushing in there had knocked a spigot off a barrel, and everything in that barrel was leaking on the floor under me. It happened to be sauerkraut juice. Can you imagine that? No, the men wouldn't have anything to do with me for the perfume or the sauerkraut juice. That was only another story.
So you went from smelling good to smelling bad.
Oh, gee. Pretty bad.
Now tell me about your experience with either Panzer tanks or...
Oh, the Germans had a way of hiding their Tiger tanks. The Tiger tanks carried an 88 millimeter weapon. And the only thing that you could do to stop that, if they were to use it again, was to insert a thermite explosive or bomb that melted inside the weapon itself. And we used to take one thermite bomb and drop it in the push it into the to the gun, and that worked. It stopped that one. But
Weren't you scared you were going to get shot? You weren't scared you were going to get shot?
oh yeah, we our problem with the tank, with the Sherman tanks, or with the Tiger tank, was that they could put a shell right through an American tank, and they just didn't stop it. But that was
Tell me how it felt when you had to go over there and put that bomb down the barrel. Tell me how it felt.
well, usually the gun was almost level. So you would either take a branch or something like that and push it in. So once it's in there, and once it ignites, you forget about it. It's gone. They can't use it.
But you must be very scared, though, that
Oh,
someone would see you and shoot you.
Well, there was nobody in those tanks. They were hidden.
Oh, I see.
They were hidden under the brush and under the trees, and they were well hidden. Some of them. Sometimes we could walk up on a tank and they wouldn't even know it's there.
What were the Germans hiding them for?
Well, I don't know why. They had retreated and just left it. They're hoping to use it again, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing I can think of. But they were massive.
What's some of the worst things that you saw?
Well, I'd rather not talk about the worst. The worst thing I could say is the results of incoming shells. That was the worst. Because I have to leave that to all of you folks. There was one thing that I hated, was the odor. The odor of war. The odor of war is unforgettable. It never leaves you. And I can't tell you what it's like, but it is something you never want to smell. No, is there anything else that I can?
Well, tell me about when you saw your mother when you got home.
Oh, yes. When I returned home after the war, the first person I saw was my grandfather. And he was in his 90s. And funniest things he said, "You've been away 3 years." God, 3 years that he said you've been away. I asked my mother what she had been doing for that period of time. And did I tell you before this that I had received this Bible? Okay. She told me that she had been reading this Bible and praying every day. Also, she had been marking it page by page for any information that might be helpful to my health. and I still go through it. It's so good. It just substantiates my faith in God, yours and mine. Believe me, He guides our lives. I know that. I would never have gotten back without His help. Believe me.
Tell us about how close you came. I mean, did you hear bullets? How close did you come to getting killed?
Only with the shrapnel, who were landing close. I could hear them landing close by. I don't know exactly how close, but I could hear them. And they were mostly over my head. Mostly, if I was lying on the ground, they were mostly above me, because in desolate you were not subject to the hit. But there were quite a few that came close and noisy. There's no question that it was an 88 calibers that were coming across. You know, you can't miss it. You can't miss it. It's just the sound. I will never know exactly.
And what would you have said to Adolf Hitler if you'd met him?
To make it.
What would you say to Adolf Hitler?
I can say, Mr. Hitler, you got exactly what you deserved. You did. And I can say another thing. When the Americans came into your Europe, they saved Europe. Not for their own benefit, no, but for the benefit of those poor people who were held in captivity under your commands. Absolutely. There was something about the way they were treated. Even their own people were treated. They were hurting physically, mentally, for food, for anything. And they were forced to do the things that I know many of them would never have wanted to do at any time. There were some good people over there. There were lots of good people over there.
We'll talk about the difference between a German officer and a German private.
You could always tell a German officer because he was underdressed. He was dressed more, not for fighting, but for looks. Every button was in place. Every medal that he ever had was on his chest. Everything was polished. And he told the privates and the sergeants and all of those beneath him who he was, that he was something else.
Well, they say you've got to be more scared of what's behind you than what's in front of you. What do you think a German private would happen to a German private if he didn't fight?
Well, most of the privates that we see, or the enlisted men, were men of youth. Many of them were 15, maybe less, 13. Many of the sergeants were ready to give up. when they felt they were being pushed east, mainly because they knew that they would be facing the Russians. And this was unforgettable. They didn't want to meet them because they many times took no prisoners. Over and over and over they kept coming, seems like. And over and over they went back east. But we have to remember that Russia was fighting two wars, really. And they helped a great deal.
What was the other war Russia was fighting?
Well, the other war was the one that they were defending themselves, town by town, county by county. They were trying to save Russia. So that was the one war, and then that was a defensive war. Then when they found they were able to save themselves, they began to fight an offensive war. They came west.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened there.
So do you think a Russian officer would shoot one of his own men if they weren't fighting?
You mean the Russians, would they?
No, a German officer, would he shoot his own man if his own man wasn't fighting?
Well, I don't know. I was told that the enlisted personnel was told, if you don't fight, you're done. We're going to give it to you. Oh, there was one case. It keeps coming. The fighting was not done on a daily basis. Sometimes you were resting. Maybe not long, but you were resting. And many times we were lying on the side of a hill trying to get a little rest. And everybody was maybe 20 feet apart or 30 feet apart and trying to sleep. One day, and I'll say this because it was true, there were two men not too far from me, and I heard one of them say to the other one, "Take this weapon and shoot me in the foot." And I thought, my God, what would happen if the bullet ricochets? I'm going to get it. Anyway, the man who said it turned around and he loaded the pistol. It was a German gun that he had taken, I guess, from a German. And he said, "Here, go ahead and take it, do it." And the guy said, "No, whoa, wait a minute. He said, "I'll be court-martialed, so I shoot you." Well, he shot him in the boot. And the noise brought the commander. He ran down there and he said, "What the hell is going on here?" And the guy who shot it said, "Well, we were trying to find out how this works." He said, "You're going to be court-martialed." And that was that.
What did happen to the guy with the bad foot?
Oh, he was out of it. He was out of the war.
Mm.
But there weren't any there weren't many. There were a few, that wanted to get out.
What about some of the people who you lost? What would you like to say about them?
Well, it's the kind of people that See, you don't know where you have 176 men in a company. You don't know most of them. You just know a few of them. And because you're together, there is a comradeship that goes with your acquaintance or your friend or anybody who's doing the same thing that you're doing. It's a feeling of satisfaction of having a friend close by, because you're all pushing the same way.
How would it feel when you'd lose some of those friends?
Well, sometimes you don't even know they're gone. Sometimes the firefight takes place 100 yards from where you are at the time. And the only thing you can hear, perhaps, is the Red Cross running to the call. And then you hear about it. Kamerad, kamerad. Medic, medic, medic. Keep calling, and the medic passes you and goes to the wounded. That's one of the problems.
Did the Germans shoot the medics, or did they have enough respect?
One that I know of. There was a staff sergeant who was wounded by machine gun fire about a week after I joined the company. And we were sitting, waiting to go forward in a long line, and we heard the staff sergeant call, "Medic, medic, medic." And as he went by me, and as he got up close to the sergeant, I guess there was machine gun fire. And they got him. And he had a helmet on. They didn't care. Luckily, very luckily, there was another company on our side over here. And our radio man called to their man and said, "This is what happened." They went around the machine gun. That's what I hear. And they got those guys.
Revenge.
Great.
Mm. But the sacrifice that those men made, you know, and it's for,
Right.
I mean, do you think it was all worth it? I mean, do you think it was worth leaving our guys back there, or American people?
You never leave one. No. You get him back somehow, some way, so he can get treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And you assure him that you're going to see him back at the medicine. You can't save them all. No.
Did you ever treat any Germans?
Did I have
Did you ever treat any Germans? Did you ever help any?
No, I didn't. No. The only Germans that would have needed treatment were the ones that I don't even know if I hit any of them during my period when I earned the Bronze Star.
I think it said in the piece of
One
paper-
I'm sure I got. I'm sure that, but the others, I don't know. They took off.
No, that was the 4 guys that were helping you.
No, the 4 guys I put them on the ground. I put him on the ground. But see, we were pinned down by this group of Germans. So we had to do something. I couldn't let them stand up, put them down. I had to get down because I didn't know where the fire was coming from. It's not all clear ground. Some of the grounds are filled with bushes and weeds and everything.
So you were shooting at the.
I was shooting at the one who I think was firing at us, but I couldn't definitely see. All I could see was the bushes move as he fell.
You were shooting with your M1.
What? You see,
What do you think, if any, mistakes the Americans made?
anyways,
Do you think there were any mistakes that the Americans made?
only with those gliders. We were always seeming to do the right thing. The big thing was to move east. And moving east, the only way you could move east was to knock out the Germans. And I know that happened
Mm-hmm.
because we passed a lot that were out of the war. And that's one thing I'm very happy about. Those guys that are still over there are heroes. You know? And that's one thing I don't claim to be. Never. I think President Reagan made it pretty clear. He said those boys that came onto those beaches were boys. They were young. They were not yet men. But they will be remembered as men. But in a way, I'm glad that I was there. Because no description can I adequately describe what I saw, and I wouldn't. Sometimes when I'm with another GI that was there even now, we might say something, but you know what I'm talking about, you know?
Now, you went to Lucky Strike after D-Day, right?
After D-Day,
Yeah, how long after D-Day did you go to Belgium?
oh, let me see.
Where were you on June the 6th?
On June the 6th, I'm trying to think now. Oh, June the 6th, I was still in the States because all the glider pilots had gone. Yeah, that was a happy day because at least we were then going to be used in a different way. Yeah, I was still in the Air Force in the 3706 Glider Squadron, and going to be moved to the infantry. That's where I was. And then it was several months before we got all our training that we moved to Washington, Delaware.
So just do me a favor, just say on June the 6th. And then I can
June the 6th. Right.
On June
On
the
June the 6th, I was at home at that time, and wait a minute, no, I was up in Washington at that time. Yeah, I was there with my lady friend, and preparing to go to Europe.
What did you think when you heard the news that D-Day had happened?
Well, there was an enlightenment that touches you. You know, you think, boy, I'm going to do something now. Where I'm going, I don't know, but I don't give a damn. I'm going.
Were you happy to hear that D-Day happened?
Oh, sure. The only thing I regret about hearing the way it happened was that it wasn't planned according to the weather. Eisenhower decided to go regardless of the weather. And there were many people lost on the shores of France and Belgium. Some guys had it easy, some guys had it very bad. Some of the mistakes that were made were mistakes that where the landing was taken at a cliff, a high cliff. And quite a number of boys from the Bedford here were lost on that cliff, because the only way they could get up there was to climb and throw a rope ladder over if they could get high enough, and then climb the rest of the way. And many of them were shot at that point.
I think Omaha Beach, there was a mistake.
Omaha, whatever it was the cliffs.
Mhm.
Terrible. It's hard to remember going back.
Mhm.
It,
What's the moral of the story?
if it's liberation of the suppressed, that is the answer to your happiness, because you have done something for somebody else and carried your part. That's the moral. Do it right. Do it well. Don't complain. Just do it. My friends, some of them, I know they would never complain. Never. They wouldn't say a word. They would just go ahead and plow ahead. More ammunition, more this, more that.
And tell me about Winston Churchill. You remember the story you told me about?
Oh yes, he was in the United States, and he was in, I think it was William Woods College, but it may have been.
I need you to say Winston Churchill, because I'd like for you to, not him, just say Winston Churchill was in the United States.
Yeah, he was over here, and he was to make a speech at a college in Fulton, Missouri. And the speech, everybody thought would be a long speech like, dignitaries do. And his idea was to make a point. And he made a point this time. I think it was William Woods College, but I'm not sure. It may have been a men's college. And he got up on the podium. He stood up there, and of course everybody was waiting. He had a cigar, of course, and he began to talk. And he said, "Never give up. Never give up. Never give up." And he walked off.
Now do me a favor, say the word Winston Churchill so I can edit it together.
Winston Churchill.
That's great. Right, I'm going to go get my notes. All right, and action.
Okay, action. During the war, we all know that we take a chance of coming back or not coming back. There was a man from Texas that I knew, that made it through the entire war without being wounded. After the war, he and the balance of our company was housed in a schoolhouse where there were bunks, double bunks for children, I guess, and the GIs were supposed to pick a bunk, and that was their bunk while they were occupying. Well, there is a way to take an M1 rifle and adjust it in order that it will fire automatically. During the afternoon, everybody in the company that were supposed to be in that schoolhouse came back from maneuvers and occupy, and he hung his rifle on the post of one of the bunks, and I guess proceeded to lie down, or try to lie down. I think he was sitting. Anyway, someone came by the bunk and hit the side of the bunk, and the rifle fell to the floor. When it hit the floor, it fired automatically because it was set that way. The first shell went through the ceiling of the schoolhouse. The second one went horizontally into the side of the wall. The next one fell farther and went right into him, right through him, and he was dead. He had come through the entire war without a scratch, and here he was, unable to go home because his own ingenuity had changed the rifle.
Now, were you ever injured?
I was never injured. Never really injured.
Did you ever have any scratches or?
Oh, scratches? Yes, sir. We always have scratches. And you do that by falling.
Okay, let me see. Oh, tell me about the ring story. Tell me your story about your ring.
Oh, yes. The entire company was pinned down in a very small town. And the reason for that was that there was a small stream that ran across the roads that we entered in to get into that town. Because we were pinned down and I had no place to go, we just hunkered down and we took our leisure just sitting there. But because I had seen a small schoolhouse just about a block away, and I knew we weren't going to move, I went to the schoolhouse, walked into one of the rooms, and there was a typewriter. And because I could type, and the German typewriters were very close to the American models, I decided to write my lady friend in Washington a letter. And there was plenty of paper, so I wrote the letter, and what I foolishly did was to leave an onyx ring next to the typewriter that my mother had given to me. Well, I finished the letter. I put it in my pocket, and I walked out, leaving the ring, forgetting it. While I was out, I went into the apartment where I had been staying before, and I thought to myself, my ring, I don't have my ring. So in the meantime, there was artillery fire coming in from a small gun, only about an inch and a half in diameter. And somehow that schoolhouse must have been in line with that small gun. I went back, and the place where the typewriter was almost obliterated by that small gun. I looked and looked and looked, and the floor was littered with all kinds of little junk. No ring. There I was, and I thought to myself, oh, what my mom's going to say about that.
I'm sure she'd rather see you.
Right. Now, I'm not quite sure of this, but in that I think it was a 2 or 3 story apartment, I walked upstairs just to look around because it was apparently empty. When I got up to nearly the top floor, I walked into a room, and there was an old man. He had a beard and everything else. He was certainly not a military man. And he had, unfortunately, I didn't know how this happened, he had a radio. And it was playing something in German. And he said to me in German, "You better quit. You better quit." And I understood him. He said, "Your leader is dead." It was Roosevelt. And that's how I found out about that. Isn't that something?
What did you tell the German?
Oh, what could I tell him? I probably waved my hand at him and told him, "Get lost."
Shut up, you old German.
I didn't know.
They had Truman coming right up, right?
Right.
And then tell me what was the future with you and your lady friend who you were writing to?
Well, she would write every other day or so mail call was really good. And when I could write, or could sit down and jot a line or something, I try to get back to her. But that kept me going. Of course, there were no plans then. You know, I didn't even know if I was going to get back. But when I got into Boston, and the Japanese had surrendered the day before, I knew very well that I was going to see her again. And she was just as lovely as before. I could not wait. But I had to go on my furlough. I had a 90-day furlough. I had to go back to St. Louis and check into the camp there to apprise myself of what was ahead.
And ultimately, what was the fate of you and this young lady? What happened?
She came down to see me in December. That was 1944. And
No, it would be in 45, right?
45 was 45.
The war ended in 45.
44, 45. But anyway, she came down to see me in December after I was home. And we made decisions to become husband and wife. So in February, we made that move. And I was married then in New York by a Presbyterian minister. Lovely wedding, because she's Russian, her family's Russian, and we all, of course, took a liking to each other. Because
did you go on to have children?
Yes, I had my first child, and 1947, and I had my daughter in 1949.